Hello everyone and welcome to the Rift. Today, we're going to be making everyone's favorite content. That's right, it's a tier list. Today, we'll be ranking every single main deck card currently available in the game. That's right, we're doing it again. Why again, you might ask? Well, it's been about a month since the last video, and my thoughts on certain cards have changed quite a bit from the time I initially started playing the game. And with reveal season starting soon, supposedly, I thought it would be a good time to solidify my thoughts on the current cards that we have so far before we start getting a ton of new ones. In this video, I will mostly only be talking about the cards that I've changed my opinions on since I made the last video, so if you haven't already watched that one, I would recommend going ahead and watching it before you dive into this one. If you're enjoying this content, make sure that you like the video, and if you're feeling spicy, make sure that you smash that subscribe button just as hard as you'd smash your favorite League of Legends character. First, let me explain the tiers. S tier means that something is too good to the point where it probably needs a nerf. Things in this tier generally negatively impact the balance of the game or the overall experience of playing. A tier. Things in this tier are great, often meta staples, or very impactful in niche scenarios. B tier. Things in this tier are playable. They're good enough to see a moderate amount of play. C tier. These things are niche. Certainly playable in a few scenarios, but don't have many other uses. D tier. Things in this tier are bad, simply put. Starting off in D tier, I think all of these cards here have just proven to be completely unplayable, unfortunately. Scrapyard Champion and Undercover Agent haven't gotten any better since I've been playing, and I've moved Tryndamere, Unchecked Power, Heimerdinger, and Possession down here too, just because I think they're also unplayable. They just simply don't work with the current card pool and rule set. If we had sideboarding in the game, I think Unchecked Power and Possession would be at least niche, but while we're only working with our main decks, I don't think these cards have any place in the format. With Tryndamere and Heimerdinger, maybe these cards will get better in the future, but for right now, they're just not being played. I think for Tryndamere, there are just a lot better options, and for Heimerdinger, it's really not worth the blue splash in Victor. I think Mono Yellow Victor is just the way to go and is a lot better than trying to put blue into that deck. Next up is C tier. I think these cards have proven to be not very good, but still can sometimes find niche usage. I think Disintegrate and Kadrigrin are decent in the ramp volley build. Disintegrates and can sometimes find some niche usage as just more removal if you don't have enough in your deck. And Kadrigrin, the orange volley bear, Catalyst, and Mobilize are pretty much exclusively played in ramp volley bear, which I don't think is a very good deck, at least not right now. It could get better once the set releases and this deck gets a bunch of new cards, but as it stands, this deck is just not very good. It's not unplayable, so I haven't put these cards down in that tier, but outside of that deck, these cards just aren't played. Ramp in general just isn't very good right now, outside of playing seals. The ramp cards that we have just don't do enough. If all you're doing is ramping in this game, you lose out on tempo quite a lot, and that's really not good in the current format that we're in. And the big cards that we have, like big volley bears and Kadrigrin and other big units, really aren't enough of a payoff to justify ramping in the early game. So I can't justify putting these cards down in D tier because they are a bit playable. They're just not that good. Stealthy Pursuer and Cemetery Attendant I could put down in D tier. They're they're pretty bad cards. I don't think they're quite unplayable. They can still find some niche usage in Jinx. I just think there are better options most of the time. So you could play them. You probably don't want to play that many copies of them, but as just a one of, they could probably be fine to be played. I definitely wouldn't play multiples of these though. They're kind of just here to fill out space in your deck if you just have like a slot left over and you don't really know what else to put in it. Onto B tier. This is the second largest tier. Let's talk about seals first. I think they're still in B tier as I put them in my previous list. They're very strong when you draw them early game. They could really help you ramp out into the late game, but if you draw them in the late game, then they're kind of just useless and you've drawn a dead card. So if you draw them in the early game, they're probably A tier, and if you draw them in the late game, they're probably C or D tier. So putting them right in the middle in B tier is probably fair. Noxus Hopeful and Legion Rearguard, they're just solid units. They're alright 2-drops. The reason I haven't put them in A tier is they kind of need help to realize their full potential. Noxus Hopeful needs another card to be played before it's good, and Legion Rearguard is a bit pricey for just a 2-might that can attack. At 3 mana and 1 recycle, that's kind of a hefty cost to pay. I think if it were cheaper, it would be a lot better, but as these cards stand now, I think they're decent. Blazing Scorcher's kind of in the same boat. 6 mana and a recycle is decent. Getting the option of just playing this down as a 5-might for 5 mana is pretty good, and having the option to also attack with it right away is also really good. This card is a lot better in Volibear than it is in other decks because of that 5-might threshold that it gives you, so you can ramp with Volibear's effect. I think there's another card that I've put in A tier that is just a strict upgrade to this card, which is why I have it down in B, but this card is definitely solid. You can make an argument for it being in A tier, but I think it belongs in B for now. Volibear and Magma Worm, these two kind of go together. They're the highest top end that you would want to play in the aggro volley build. Playing Magma Worm for 8 and then next turn playing Volibear for 10 and attacking it with it right away is pretty good, but it's a very expensive play that doesn't come up all that often, so when it works, it's really good, but sometimes it just won't work out. You just won't be able to take an entire turn to play Magma Worm and not really do anything else. Clockwork Keeper, Caitlyn, and Meditation, I think are just decent cards for Yasuo. Clockwork and Meditation are okay draw cards. Clockwork is a bit expensive with its recycle cost. You really don't want to do that early game in Yasuo, but if you have Seal, then it becomes a lot more feasible, especially if you're going second. Same with Caitlyn. You really don't want to be recycling early in Yasuo, but there just aren't many other options for good units to play in the deck right now, so you just have to run some number of these cards sometimes. Their effects are really good, and the potential upsides of these cards are quite good, but the downsides are also a lot. Having to recycle is bad. Caitlyn needs some help. You really need to combo her with Yasuo's legend effect to move her and then shoot something else on the other battlefield. Otherwise, the card is just not that great. And Clockwork just being played as a 2-might for 2 mana with no effect is just not great. So these cards at their best sometimes feel like A tier cards, but at their worst they feel like C tiers. So I think sticking them in B tier is a fair compromise. Meditation, I feel pretty much the same way about. Sometimes it's very good. Getting to draw 2 cards for 2 mana is pretty good, but other times it's just 2 mana draw 1, which is pretty bad. Watchful Sentry is kind of just a solid card always. It's a very consistent card. It doesn't really have any crazy upside or any crazy downside. It's just always decent. Solid turn 1 play, but that's pretty much it. Wraith, I've stuck in B tier because it does have use in free-for-all and maybe in 2v2 as well, but in terms of 1v1, I think this is a C tier card. It's not that great. 5-might for 6 mana is overcosted, and this really doesn't do anything by itself. You need to have stuff die to actually draw. And by the time this gets dropped onto the board, it's probably mid to late game anyway, so you're not going to be drawing that many cards. And if you're just holding this back in your base to be a draw engine, that's not good either, because you've basically wasted 6 mana to just draw some cards over the course of a few turns, which isn't very good. That's very slow. Ursine is pretty much the only good ramp card in the game, and it's still not even that great. 7 mana for this is quite a lot. If it were 6 mana, that would be a lot more playable. In ramp fully, this card's pretty good because of the tank specifically. When you're building your big tower of guys, they have to target this guy first, which is pretty good. It protects all of your other guys that you would rather save, and getting to ramp 2 when you play this is pretty good as well. It's arguable that it could be put into C tier just because ramp itself is not very good of a deck, but I think this card's just a little bit better than being niche. Warwick is pretty much the same card as Blazing Scorcher. You don't have the option of just playing it down as a 5-drop 5-might for Bully's ramp effect, but it does get the added benefit of killing stuff that's damaged when it attacks, so I think it's pretty comparable to Blazing and also deserves a spot in playable. You can combo it with Stormbringer to kill anything in the game at a single battlefield, which is pretty good. That doesn't really come up that much, but it is a nice interaction to know about. Rebuke, I think I heavily overestimated when I did the last list. This card is just very expensive for being card advantage negative. Yeah, you set your opponent back some time because they have to play their guy out again, but you haven't really accomplished anything except buy time. So if there's a problematic unit that's giving you trouble, this doesn't really get rid of it. It's just gonna come back next turn. I think this card is a lot better in Jinx than it is in Yasuo, because Jinx is a very fast deck and can capitalize a lot better on slowing your opponent down than Yasuo can. Yasuo is a much slower deck that likes to win the game slowly over the course of more turns than Jinx does, so it can't really capitalize as much on this card as Jinx can. And Yasuo wants things left on battlefields anyway, so you can attack it with the Yasuo champion. So I think in Jinx specifically, maybe this card could be deserving of an A tier spot, but definitely not in Yasuo. Misfortune, I think, is just a decent card. It's pretty awkward to try and play in Yasuo because of the early recycle cost. Again, you really don't want to be doing that because it delays you playing your Yasuo champion a turn sometimes. I think it's a lot better in Jinx, and even then it's not great because it's 4-drop, so sometimes this card's pretty good, but other times it's just a 4-drop or might that doesn't really do anything. Kayn is in kind of a similar boat. It's a 6-drop 6-might that sometimes just doesn't really do much. It can be pretty good other times, clearing out 2 battlefields in a turn if you can get that off. That's really good, but your opponent probably isn't going to play into that, or they'll have an answer for that. So I think this card is just decent. Sometimes it feels like an A tier card, sometimes it feels like it's C tier. Purple Jinx is pretty much the same as well. You need a lot of cards to combo with it to actually make it do crazy stuff. When you can really pop off with it, it feels amazing, but sometimes it is just a 5-drop 5-might that just sits there, and most of the time you'll have to wait a turn to really use it. 5 is kind of the top end in Jinx. It's pretty expensive for that deck, so sometimes this will be all you're doing on your turn, and if you don't already have like a merchant down on the board from a turn prior or any other way of discarding cards immediately, this card can kind of just sit there for a turn and not do anything. Teemo, I think I overestimated in my last list. It's an okay card. The decks that could play this are Jinx and Yasuo, both of which don't really want to be holding battlefields that often. Jinx can do it early game versus Victor, but other than that, it's kind of pointless to try and hold battlefields against Victor, so I think this card is just alright. Paying 1 power to get 4 might is obviously very good, but it has a lot of downsides and a lot of weaknesses to it that I think it only deserves a spot in B tier. If we get a lot more purple hidden cards, this card could be a lot better, but as of right now, it's the only one, so it's very telegraphed and it's pretty easy to lay around. Scout, I think, is just basically the same thing as Watchful Sentry, except it's better in the early game and a lot worse in the late game. Maybe you could argue that it's a C tier card, but I think it's good enough to warrant a spot in B tier. It's pretty similar to Sentry. Alright, A tier. I think most of the cards in this tier are just self-explanatory. They're pretty strong, they don't have many downsides. In most scenarios, they're just either going to be good cards or great cards. I think were some cards that I overestimated and moved down on the tier list. There are also some cards that I underestimated and I've moved up into A tier. I've moved up Rocket because I think it's a very good card. I think all of the signature spells that we have right now are very good. There are a lot of niche interactions with Rocket that I didn't know about when I made the last tier list that make this card a lot better. The timing when this card's effect in the discard pile activates is very important, as well as it being an optional effect. That's pretty important too. And being one of the only cards that can hit the opponent's base is very strong. This card is just very versatile. It's always good. You kind of just always want to draw it, and even if you draw multiples with them, you can just discard them and get them back, so that's not even that bad. Overall, just a very good card. Buccaneer is probably one of the best early game cards in Volibear. This card just being a 4-drop 5 might is very strong. You get to ramp really early, which is going to put you pretty far ahead throughout the rest of the game, at least in terms of mana advantage. And going second, if you have the battlefield that gives you an extra room, you can just play this guy down turn 1, which is a very strong play. The only potential downside to this card is the discard effect, but if you're playing the aggro build of Volibear and you're playing cards like Flame Choppers, the discard effect could even be an upside, which is pretty good. I think Madden Marauder is a lot better than I gave it credit for. Being able to push stuff off of battlefields is very strong for winning in the late game. It allows you to just ignore any one unit your opponent puts onto a battlefield to try and hold it, and even pulling your own units back with it is also very strong in the late game. I've moved up 4 cards from B tier up to A tier in Victor's deck. Harness Dragon, Machine Evangel, Victor, and Cruel Patron are all just very good cards. I think I really underestimated Harness Dragon, especially. Just being able to kill any unit on the field is very strong. You can kill anything on a battlefield or in base, and giving you a decently stated body for it as well is pretty good. Evangel is just really hard to deal with. 4 might for 5 isn't that bad. It's not great, but it isn't that bad. And when you kill it, now you have to deal with 3 separate units. I think this card just on face value isn't that strong, but the fact that it can give you 3 more attackers for next turn when it dies is very good. Victor, I think, is a decent card. If it wasn't a champion, I think I'd put it down in B tier, but the fact that this is a champion and you can just play it or not play it whenever is very good. When you don't really have much else to do, you can just play him and he's gonna generate you some extra units, which is not bad. I think it's just always a good card that doesn't really have many downsides because it's your chosen champion. So I think it just always being good warrants a spot in A tier. Could be stuck down in B tier as well because it isn't that crazy, but I just think the consistency it has is very good. Cruel Patron being a 6 might for 4 is great. It's a decently overstated unit for its cost, and killing a unit with Victor is never bad. It can even trigger effects like Victor's effect. Being able to play this guy down onto a battlefield is pretty good for trying to hold in the mid to late game as well, especially if you can back it up with siphon power and other stuff like that. Could be put down in B tier as well because it really is just a big stat stick and nothing else, but I think the amount of stats that it gives you makes it pretty good. It's just a consistently good card. It doesn't really ever have a time where you don't want to play this. You're pretty much just always going to have a token on the board somewhere, so I think for its consistency, it deserves a spot in A tier. Alright, let's talk about the S tier cards, the cards that are currently a problem. I've moved Vi up here from last time because I think it simply is just too big for its cost. Starting out as a 3 might for only 2 is already pretty good, but the fact that this can basically get infinitely big is crazy. especially in Jinx. And the ganking on this as well is just a little ridiculous. I think something about this card is probably going to change when the set comes out. Something should change. I think either its base might should go down from 3, maybe to like 2 or 1, or its cost should go up from 2. Maybe they could remove the ganking as well, but something basically has to be done about this card to make it a little more balanced, because right now I think it's quite strong. Definitely a bit too strong. Hidden Blade and Cold a Week are still in here. I think Hidden Blade is probably the best card in the game right now, and it's not close. This card is so strong, it's so versatile, it's so hard to deal with. The fact that you can't even get rid of the unit at the battlefield that it's hidden on is crazy, because they can just chain it and draw 2 cards and you've effectively done nothing. That's crazy. Also, being able to kill any unit in the game is also crazy. This card definitely should not be able to do that. This card being able to kill stuff like 12 drop fully simply just shouldn't happen. Something about this card has to be changed. Either it has to be more expensive, or limit what it can kill, or specify that only your opponent gets to draw, or something like that. Something needs to happen. Cold a Week I think is honestly pretty fair in 1v1. It doesn't feel that oppressive. It's just free-for-all, and probably 2v2 as well, where this card is super broken. It really just doesn't fit with the format. Rand Stratagem I've moved up here from A tier, because I think this is also one of the best cards in the game. +5 to everything you have is honestly ridiculous. This card isn't even that expensive at 6 mana, and the fact that this card can be played as an action on your opponent's turn, meaning you can use it defensively, is probably just something that shouldn't happen. I think something about this card needs to get changed. Either it needs to go to like 8 mana, or the action needs to get removed, or it needs to pump things for less than 5. Something should happen. This card is too strong as it stands. Yasuo is on here, not because I think he's too strong, but because I just don't like the gameplay loops that he creates. And what I mean by that is, it just feels really bad when you play him as the Yasuo player and he dies immediately. You feel like the game is pretty much over. And also, on the opposite side of the situation, when your opponent is staring down a Yasuo that they simply just can't get rid of, it can feel like you're slamming your head into a brick wall and you've probably lost the game just because this card exists. I think this card either loses you the game or wins you the game by itself sometimes, which isn't a gameplay loop that I'm very fond of. I think they've said that they're changing this card, and I hope they do, probably to something like when he enters he hits something or he fights something. That would be a lot healthier of an effect. Basically, I just think right now he's way too low roll or way too high roll of a card. There's really no in between. The potential downsides of playing him and having him just die are massive, and the potential upsides of him just sweeping things off fields turn after turn is also massive, and I really don't like that in terms of card design. I like cards to be a little more middle of the road and a little more balanced than that, so I'm hoping they change this card in some way. Alright, I think that's enough rambling for today. A shorter video than the last tier list one, but that's to be expected. There's not as much to talk about. Thank you guys for watching and sticking with my content, and yeah, that's all I gotta say. Take care.